Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
It is time once again for everybody to come aboard the one and done train. I will be your conductor on the journey this evening. My name is Jay Heinrich. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. William Cannon. We will get to our Baron of Bread shortly, but we will first start by introducing the captain of our ship, El Capitano, getting into our mid-major preview tonight, Mr. Mike Holland at MC Holland 34 on Twitter. Hit him up, smash that follow button. Mike, we're going to talk some mid-majors tonight, man. What is up?
Oh, man. It says mid-majors, right? When we talk about our brackets and these guys come through busting the doors down and tearing up 2 seeds, and you got teams with the last name with nickname Peacocks, destroying everything. It's a good time, right? So we're gonna talk about some of these teams. Let's get over to the Baron of Bread, man. What's this guy doing down there? What's up, Eric?
Hey, there he is. What's up, Eric
Oh,
Roma? Follow him on Twitter at FantasyNav. What's up, big cat?
the Baron of Bread, the Lord of Loaf, the Chief of the Crust. We got so many bread jokes. We got them going for days in here. And Mike might be lamenting how these mid-majors are out here busting some brackets. But, I mean, that's for a good cause, right? Like, there are some teams that are not in the power conferences that can make some noise. So, looking forward to breaking down some of those teams tonight.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the most dangerous teams from these mid-major ranks as ranked by Ken Palm. We're going to sort of go in sequential order as how they're ranked in Ken Palm's rankings. We're not hitting every single mid-major that you might think of, but we're going to hit quite a few of them tonight, talk about some strengths, talk about some weaknesses. Some of these teams may actually have to win their conference tournament to get in, as a lot of these conferences we're going to talk about are one-bid conferences. But, let's just dive right into it, boys. We're going to talk first about the UAB Blazers coming out of Conference USA, starting the season off 2023 Ken Palm ranking of 52. Head coach Andy Kennedy entering his 3rd year with UAB. Last year went 27-8, 14-4 in Conference USA. Did make the tournament, which is unique to these teams that we're going to talk about tonight. They were the only team that made the tournament last year, but they slipped up in the first round, lost to Houston. Very efficient offensively, somewhat efficient defensively, 79th in the country in tempo. We're going to start with Mike. Mike, tell us a little bit about some of the strengths that the Blazers will present this season.
Yeah, well, the Blazers, when me and Eric did our little bracket last year, we had them beating Houston. So we're definitely really high on these guys. And it starts with their dynamic guard. I mean, Jordan Jelly Walker, who, Jay, you dropped him on our top 20 countdown. If you guys haven't checked that out, follow us, Twitter, TikTok. Those are still coming out as we approach the the season here in a few weeks. But yeah, for Walker, I mean, averaged 20 points per game, 5 assists, shot 40% from 3, 88% from free throw line. I mean, this guy is one of the most dangerous guards in the country. I mean, what can you say? Conference USA Player of the Year. I mean, this guy can just take over games offensively. I think the big thing for me with UAB is we talked about how big the portal is, right? And it's not often you see these type of mid-major teams just hauling in a really nice portal. But it starts with Eric Gaines. He's a 2-way player from LSU, so getting that down transfer. He was on our Dr. Roto top 100 list, averaged 9, 3, and 3. Very talented. I think where it gets exciting is a potential starting running mate with these guys in the backcourt. That's Ladarius Brewer from East Tennessee State. He's coming along with his brother Ty Brewer. Ladarius averaged 14 and 5 last year. He's a big 6'5" guard. Kind of plays that wing off guard position. The Ty Brewer is more of a stretch 4, averaged 10 and 7 last year, shot 35% from 3. So lots of like in the backcourt. And then you look at the front court transfer, Javian Davis coming over from Mississippi State, and he's 6'9". He's going to bring some toughness in. An SEC transfer coming over here. Can do some scoring inside. Obviously played a limited role, so probably going to play a limited role here as well. But anytime you get these guys that have been, playing decent minutes in the SEC, like Gaines and Davis have, that's a really nice thing to have. And also, you've got the exciting front court returning. KJ Buffin, he was at Ole Miss a few years ago. averaged 10 and 7 last year. Trey Jemison, he's a 7-footer, averaged 7 and 7. He's a rim protector, so you got someone there that can block shots at 1.5 per game. So you just go up and down this roster, and what Coach Kennedy's done here is pretty impressive. And these guys are probably staring just outside the top 25 to start the season in the polls. They get hot early, and these guys are going to make some noise. But with all mid majors, right, there are going to be some weaknesses. So Eric, why don't you start us off and let us know, what are some of the downsides to the Blazers this year?
Yeah, I don't know how much I would categorize them as weaknesses as much as I would say that they're question marks, right? The first thing that is kind of murky for me is actually an area of strength. This team was prolific from behind the arc. As a team, they shot 38% from deep, 10th highest 3-point percentage in the country. But conversely, they didn't really take a lot of threes, 292nd in 3-point rate, right? So it kind of poses the question, right? Like, does this efficiency scale? Was this team just waiting for and looking for those best shots? But if Coach Kennedy wants to try to expand this out and attempt more 3-point shots, are we going to see that efficiency carry forward, or do we see it taper off a little bit, right? If it carries forward, then these Blazers are going to be a legitimate threat coming out of a non-major conference. The other side is really what Jay, you teed up off the top, right? A lot of these mid majors, they basically have to win their conference tournament to make their way in, right? So, I mean, how many bids can Conference USA get, really? And specifically for the Blazers, right? They're competing with teams that we will talk about tonight, other teams that are very strong in their own right, Western Kentucky, UNT, Florida Atlantic, right? Like, they have legitimate threats to making a run and making their way out of the tournament. So this conference is really stout. They're 11th overall out of 33 conferences, according to KenPom. If this is in fact a one-bid league where they have to win their way in through the tournament, they've got a tough road to do it, right? So, I don't think that those are necessarily weaknesses as much as they are kind of obstacles that this team has to clear. But ultimately, I mean, shout out to Coach Kennedy. He's put together a real good squad with this program.
That's a good point, Eric. I like how you phrase that instead of weaknesses, question marks, because UAB is a really solid squad. The leadership is there. The depth is there. This is going to be one that's fun to watch. If you like UAB this year, if you like our guy, Jelly Walker, one of the best nicknames in college basketball, smash that like button, show him some love, give us some love, and hit that subscribe button if you already haven't done that. The next team that we're going to move on to here is the Furman Paladins out of the Southern Conference. KenPom has them ranked preseason number 69, which is a very, very nice ranking for them. Head coach Bob Ritchie entering his 6th year with Furman. Last year went 22-12, 12-6 in the Southern Conference. Very efficient last year, according to KenPom metrics. Offensively at 20th, not as efficient defensively, 174th, and snail's pace slow at 297. So, Mike, Furman, obviously very efficient offensively, some other things to work on. Let's focus on some strengths right now, some positives with this Furman team.
Yeah, with Furman, it starts with the two guys coming back. It's going to be Mike Bothwell and Jalen Slauson coming back for their super senior season. Say that 10 times fast. Both were first-team SoCon, so you're getting two of the best players in the conference returning. Bothwell's a big guard. He can score inside and outside, average 15, 4, and 3. Slauson, man, he is a lot of fun to watch. He's a 6'7". He's like a Swiss Army knife, man. They try to play this 5-man out system where he's the 5-man. He averaged 14, 7, and 3, and nearly two blocks and 2 steals a game, which was good enough for Defensive Player of the Year in the conference. I think the thing that's going to kind of help them out is they're going to get a transfer here from Wake Forest, and we're going to talk a lot about down transfers, and the term is kind of loosely used, right? We're just talking about someone that comes from a Power 5 school or one of the the higher majors sliding into these mid-major ranks. A Forbert top 100 recruit, and that's Carter Witt. Could be a potential X factor for this team, so can help both with some ball handling and distributing. This kid kind of struggled in the ACC, really never got it going. But playing both well off the ball, so that way he's not having to play every single possession as a facilitator, and maybe getting some off-ball screens just can kind of open up your offense.
The super senior stuff is fascinating to me. We're getting guys that have been playing college basketball longer than ever before. And when you get that sort of experience on a team like this, it can definitely pay dividends. Eric, there are some positives, obviously, with this Furman team. Where do you see them with Furman? Do you see them as question marks like you did earlier with UAB? Are there some true weaknesses that they're going to have to fight through in order to win that Southern Conference and make the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, fair point about, these super seniors, right? Like I do think that the overall sort of state of play in college basketball is improved with so many guys hanging around for those additional years. The thing that is concerning for me for the Paladins is a bit more stylistic in nature, right? Like Mike, you talked about this 5-out system, and I don't know if they really have the size to be effective in running that system, right? Like their biggest guy, Garrett Hine, is 6'9". Talked about Slauson, like, really dynamic player, but putting him at the 5, he's 6'7", right? And that showed last year, right? Like having these undersized bigs down there, they gave up almost 53% from 2-point last year, right? Like they were just getting abused by those, those traditional big men that have some size on them. And it's a trade-off, right? Like, this team is very much so built to work through the 3-ball, and you're sacrificing things when you do that, right? 340th in free throw rate because they're not dumping the ball down and trying to get those buckets around the rim. They're not getting fouled as often. They're not getting into the stripe as often. So those are free points that they're kind of leaving by the wayside, and specifically with these slower tempo teams, right? Like if you can't capitalize on those gimme punts on the shots from the charity stripe, it puts the onus on you to be really, really effective and efficient shooting the 3, and it's hard to tell if that can really scale and maintain over the course of the season.
When you run a system like this, 5-out, everybody's shooting threes, it definitely can lead to that high offensive efficiency. And on the other side of the ball, because people are getting those long rebounds and taking them up the floor, you might struggle with the defensive efficiency, and that's exactly what we saw with Furman last year. Let's move on now to the Missouri Valley Conference, to our next team, ranked 79th in the preseason in the KenPom rankings. That's the Drake Bulldogs, led by Coach Darian DeVries, entering his 5th year with Drake. Last year went 25-11, 13-5 in the Missouri Valley Conference. 73rd offensive efficiency last year. KenPom ranked 113th in defensive efficiency, and 228th in tempo. So, Mike, apart from being a part of God's plan, what are the strengths for Drake?
Oh, you got me. The strengths are actually father-son. Coach DeVries done a great job leading this team through 5 years, heading into year 5, and his son last year was kind of a star in the making. Tucker DeVries, really good freshman year. Now he's heading into his sophomore year, and averaged almost 14 points per game, 4.5 boards. Showed some playmaking ability from that 3-4 spot. A little over 2 assists a game. Second team MVC and freshman of the year. And he's a 6'7" versatile wing. Like I said, can play that 3 or 4 positions. So he's only going to continue to grow and get better. Should challenge for conference play of the year. So we'll see how he continues to grow. And I think the thing for the mid majors is there's a lot of super seniors and like graduate seniors that are going to be lurking around, right? And it's going to make these teams really, really dangerous. We got 3 graduate senior guards that are back, a ton of experience and a ton of playmaking ability. Roman Penn, really good player. Been following him for a few years. Been playing a lot in DFS, averaged 11, 3, and 4. Has dealt with some injuries. There's a physical guard, is Garrett Sturtz, and he's got a kind of an old man type game, right? Just a physical guard at 6'3", averaged 11 points, but he averaged 7 rebounds at 6'3". The guy just gets into the paint, over 50% from the field. Doesn't really shoot it from the outside, but he's just one of those, those throwback guards that, gets into the paint and does some damage. So you pair those guys with DeVries, and you also have the 3-and-D guard, DJ Wilkins, shot nearly 38% from 3, and he made the all-defensive team. So you've got a lot to like on this team, a lot of weapons. So for me, it's like, man, can they get it done on the defensive end?
We talked a little bit ago with Furman, Eric, about their willingness, their want to, shoot the 3-ball. And Drake is a team that last year was pretty poor from deep. Is that something that they're going to need to work on? And if so, like, what else are they going to need to sort of shore up if they plan on not just, sort of trying to get out of the Missouri Valley Conference, but maybe trying to, go a little bit in the tournament come March?
Yeah, I mean, look, you asked, do I love this team? And I can say only partly, and it's a lot of what you mentioned, right? Like, there are legitimate question marks about whether or not this team can improve their shooting from outside. 33% from three last year, 213th in the country, so a good deal below average. And the guys that they're going to look to shore up that shooting are the guys that were here last year, right? We talk about Penn, we talk about Sturtz shooting 21 and 28% from deep, respectively. Like, they're going to have to take a pretty considerable step forward in order to move the needle for this team from the outside. And that, I mean, an improvement to that order of magnitude is rare, right? You couple that with the fact that there are several losses in the front court, right? You talk about Murphy heading out, talk about Shinquan Hemphill heading out. These were key pieces on this program on the rise. Now, that really puts the onus on, guys like Darnell Brody. He's going to be asked to really step up. He's a solid rebounder, but it's hard to say whether or not he can really carry the load that, those two guys are going to leave behind them. And, ultimately, we've talked about this in some of our other preview shows, right? Like, a lot of teams are going to face question marks as to who's going to be the guy to step up, right? I think the thing that is a little bit different and concerning about these Bulldogs is there's not a super clear answer as to who the most likely candidate to be or candidate is to be the one to step up, right? So whenever that's the case, leaves me feeling a little bit uneasy about how this team is going to transition following the exit of some key pieces.
If you improve the 3-point shooting and you find somebody in that front court to step up, Drake will Tuesday slide right into the tournament here. We're going to move on now to our next team to discuss the Liberty Flames, representing the Atlantic Sun Conference. We're now moving a little bit forward into our KenPom rankings, number 82 preseason ranked for the 2023 season. Head coach Richie McKay entering his 10th year with Liberty. Last year, Liberty went 22-11, 12-4 in the A-Sun. 138th offensive efficiency, 139th defensive efficiency. So a little bit of balance there, I guess, if you will. But, 273rd in tempo. Mike, what's it going to take for Liberty to sort of distance themselves from everybody else in the Atlantic Sun?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing they can do is give the ball to Darius McGee again, two-time Atlantic Sun Player of the Year. A guy that we thought really long and hard about in our top 20 countdown. We went with two other mid-major guards, one that we just talked about, Jelly Walker, and then Max Asmus, who I feel like we're probably going to talk about him a little bit later. But, man, this guy can score almost 25 points a game. Like this guy he can shoot the three almost 40%. This offense goes as he goes. I mean, the usage rate is absolutely insane. He led the country in usage rate last year and percentage of team shots taken. So, if this guy needs to be healthy, obviously, if these Cats want to make a run, and that's you find a lot of mid majors. You either have the collection of guys that are above average, or you have the superstar player, and that's kind of what they have. They do have some guys returning though. Nice front court duo, Kyle Rode and Shiloh Robinson. Backup Blake Preston's also coming back in the front court. So you got some guys that can stretch the defense. At least Preston's 6'9". The other two guys are 6'7". He can provide some size and rebounding. This is a kind of a smaller type team. You find a lot of mid majors play kind of these 4-guard and sometimes these 5-man out, and have these 6'7", 6'8" guys at the 5 spot. So I think for this team, and McGee really wants to get it done. It'd be really fun to see him in the tournament. I feel like he could be a Max Asmus type that knocks out a couple of teams, makes us like a Sweet 16 type run.
I just talked a little bit ago about their defensive efficiency being 139th, but Eric, there's more to the story than that on the defensive side of the ball, is there not?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, right? Like 139th is fine, right? Average, slightly below average, right? But even with that being the case, there's still a fair amount to be desired when it comes to the defensive side of the ball for these Flames. Like, you know, 257th in opponent turnover rate, well into the 300s in blocks and steals, and they can be okay on defense, but if they're not able to get a couple of extra possessions by getting a block, getting a big steal, it really works against what they're trying to do. And look, we're a couple teams in. We've already talked about this 5-out system a few times. It's prominent in the mid-major programs because it's a real solid kind of counter punching type of style, but it sort of leaves you exposed on the defensive end, right? It's hard to get blocks when you're when you're out there on the perimeter. It's hard to poke some away. So the defensive side definitely has some question marks. And while McGee looks to be prolific, right? We've seen it a lot with these small to mid major programs. I worry that they kind of end up being a little too reliant on him, right? There are guys on this roster, Brody Peebles, Joseph Van Zandt, that can potentially take some pressure off of him, but ultimately, night in and night out for one guy to be shouldering that load. And as we get, out of regular season play into conference play, into postseason play, they will run into some opponents that can take McGee out. And I don't know if they've got the guys to kind of step up and still be competitive whenever that happens.
It's going to be really interesting to see how Coach McKay customizes his lineup at Liberty so they only play how they need. And defensively, it's really going to play a big part in whether or not they can move forward or have success, I should say, this year. Let's take another step forward here in our mid-major preview here. Let's move on to the Toledo Rockets, a program that you both had a conversation with the head coach, Todd Kowalczyk, entering his 13th year with Toledo. Toledo is ranked 86 in the Ken Palm rankings preseason, representing the Mid-American Conference, the MAC. Return of the MAC. Yeah, last year they went 26-8, 17-3 in that conference. Fairly efficient offensively, 48th, 160 defensive efficiency, and 86th in tempo, so a little bit above average there. Mike, we'll start with you. Coach Kowalczyk is, when you guys talked to him earlier in the preseason, he was extremely optimistic about the outlook for this program and where they were going, especially where they start and really where this program starts and stops, I guess I should say, with that front court duo. You want to talk a little bit about those guys and sort of how they help this Toledo team take off?
Yeah, first big shout out. I appreciate Coach Kowalczyk joining the One and Done show. It was a lot of fun to get to talk to him, and he's done some great things. Back-to-back MAC regular season champs. Unfortunately, just haven't won that that conference tournament to get into the big dance. Being a one bid league, I think they've only had one bid since I think it was like '98 or something like that. So yeah, tough, right? But super offensive team here with the front court being shooters, man. Cedric Milner, JT Shoemate. I mean, it's probably the best duo and definitely in the conference. One of the best shooting duos in the country from the front court. Milner last year, 15, 5 and 2, shot 38% from three. Shoemate, another 6'7" kid, stretch 5, 15, 6 and 2, 48% from three. So when you're 4 and 5 man, shoot 40 and 40, almost 50% from three. Now you can see why they were 48th in offensive efficiency. They can do a little bit of scoring inside, but mostly do their damage from the outside. Obviously, tougher defenses to handle, but I think the thing that makes me most excited is the step that Ray J. Dennis could take. This kid's primed for a breakout year. Watched him a lot. Kind of took a backseat to Ryan Rollins last year. I still averaged almost 13, 5 and 4. I mean, coach on the court. Coach Kowalczyk said he's got a spot for him on his bench. So, the kid can control the game and I'm really looking at Toledo as a team that's gonna bust into the tournament. And man, you're not gonna want to play these guys that shoot it from deep. They catch fire in a tournament game, and it's gonna be pretty scary for maybe a 3 or 4 seed. So, Eric, what your talk from Kowalczyk, like what did you take from that? Any weaknesses that kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the Todd father. Like, absolutely a blast to have him on. Super fun interview. And, categorically speaking, like building something really special here in Toledo. The things that are cause for concern for me are really twofold, right? Like Ryan Wallins is gone. He's off to the NBA. As we talked about when we interviewed Coach Kowalczyk, the defending champion Golden State Warriors went up and got him, right? He's going to have a role to play in their title defense. And, you talk about Ray J. Dennis, you talk about, Tyler Cochran coming in from Ball State. These are super talented guys that, will need to step up. But the reality is for these mid-major programs, like NBA talent's not walking through the door every year, right? So I do think that it's going to be a bit of a transition for the Rockets. I think that Coach Kowalczyk will be able to make the necessary adjustments, but I'm not sure if what we saw from them last year is going to be kind of a mirror image of how they approach the game this year. And the other area for me is really on the defensive side, right? Much like we talked about with Liberty, pretty solid defensively overall, but really not getting their fair share of turnovers, right? 331st in opponent turnover rate, 246 in block rate. And specifically, we talk about getting into the conference tournament. We talk about matching up with, some of these high major teams for a potential March Madness run. And it's, the way that they play defense is going to be difficult for them to match up with some of these stretch bigs and in this more kind of positionless style of basketball, right? So, there's a lot of things to like about what's being built in Toledo, but those are two areas that, I think will present a little bit of headwinds for Coach Kowalczyk and the Rockets.
With that conversation you guys had with him, he was pretty adamant about the MAC being a 2-bid league, and at least if they're not already there, the quality of ball being played in that conference will be viewed upon, in his opinion, as a 2-bid league moving forward. But that defensive style, like you were hitting on, Eric, that doesn't match up well necessarily with some of these other tournament teams. It's going to be interesting to see how Coach Kowalczyk sort of plays off of that. 13 years in, he is what he is. He's a really good coach. His players love him. They love him in that community. He loves the community. They're building something extremely special there, and I think that's a guy that they'll end up building a statue of on that campus, because I don't think he's going anywhere. But can they get over the hump there? And especially if that is that pressure there to know you have to win that conference postseason tournament to get in, that weighs on some teams. So we'll see how it goes there. If you guys are still sticking around, and we hope you are, give us a like and show Coach Kowalczyk and the Toledo Rockets some love. Like and subscribe so you can catch everything that we're doing here. We're going to move on now to our next team coming out of the Colonial Athletic Association, the CAA, Towson Tigers. KenPom ranked 98th coming into the season. Head coach Pat Scarry entering his 12th year with Towson. Last year went 25-9, 15-3 in the CAA, 58th offensive efficiency, 96th defensive efficiency. Another team on this list, though, Mike, that plays at a snail's pace. There are some positive to talk about, though. Tell us a little bit about what this Tiger program has going for them.
Yeah, Towson brings a lot of talent back here, and it starts with Cam Holden. He's going to be their primary playmaker. He averaged 13, 8, and 3, almost 2 steals per game, so he can get it done on the defensive side. Was first-team CAA and all-defensive team, so it's going to be one of the best players in the conference, and it always helps whenever you're trying to get that one bid. But you're also going to bring back in the backcourt too Jason Gibson and Nicholas Timberlake. Timberlake was another first-team CAA player. He's a 6'4" guard, averaged almost 15 a game, shot almost 41% from 3. And Gibson, 6'1" guard, he's a good shooter as well. These guys got to knock down open shots, right? Man, another team that plays a 5-out type system. That's why you see a lot of these mid majors with high offensive efficiencies, because they're 4 and 5 man. Can really get it done and play out on the perimeter. Lends a little bit to be had on the defensive side, but returning forward Charles Thompson. I mean, this is a small ball center that can kind of get it done defensively, which is why you saw them in the top 100. He's 6'7", but he plays bigger. Averaged almost 2 blocks a game. Pulling down 7 boards here. I mean, he's key on the defensive side. And then an interesting player here, Division II Player of the Year, Sekou Sila. He's a physical wing. They can play this guy at the 4. I mean, he's 6'5". This is gonna be a small lineup. You're talking, 4 guys 6'5" and under, and then Thompson is 6'7". But they're going to be pretty devastating on the offensive end. I mean, this guy averaged 22 and 10 last year in D2. So, sliding over to the mid-major ranks, you still expect him to be, pretty prolific on the offensive end. Maybe not 22 points a game. With some of these other guys that are here, but definitely someone that can score and play that 3 or 4 position. His transition, I think, is going to be really key as to how far this team can really go, and if they can grab that bid and maybe make some noise in March.
When we talk about those 5-out type offenses, right, that, it doesn't necessarily match up with the 302nd ranked tempo, right? A lot of times we see, these teams that want to shoot the 3 ball and want to go out wide, they weren't necessarily in a hurry to get those shots up. And even when there were the long rebounds, it seems, according to the KenPom metrics, that they were at least, on the above average side, not super great, but decent at being efficient defensively as well. But it is a smaller team, like you were saying, Mike. So, Eric, we talk about guard play a lot in college basketball, especially as you get into February conference tournaments, March, the big dance. Is there something left to be desired in this backcourt now for this team? And is that something that's going to hold this team back?
Yeah, I mean, look, stop me when you've heard this one before, right? Another mid-major program that's looking to counterpunch against, more talented rosters by deploying this 5-out system, and that system, leaves them oftentimes undersized and lacking on the defensive end, right? Mike, your point's fair. Thompson, certainly plays and punches above his weight class there at 6'7". Chase Parr plays a little bit smaller, but he is their biggest guy at 6'10". So against these larger teams, he'll certainly have a role to play. One thing that I think is a unique challenge onto this team is specifically with regard to the backcourt that you're kind of alluding to, right? Like we look at guys like Cam Holden, Terry Nolan, heading out the door, and these are true facilitators, and facilitation is needed with this 5-out strategy, right? So ultimately it leaves a question as to who is going to step up now that Nolan is gone. It seems like it should be Cam Holden, but whether or not he can effectively facilitate the ball to these shooters on the perimeter is an open question for this team.
Never like going into a season sort of not knowing who your primary ball handler is going to be, at least, especially when Holden needs a break or if there's an injury there. Like, that's definitely a big question mark for me there. But, when you play in the Colonial Athletic Association and you play this certain style, excuse me, you might have some time to figure this out, but it's not, you're going to have to end up winning your conference tournament to make it to the dance, and that's sort of what's ahead of Towson here. We're going to move on now to our next team here on our mid-major preview. Also representing Conference USA, the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. 2023 season, preseason ranked, I should say, in KenPom metrics, number 99, just inside of the top 100 teams. Head coach Rick Stansbury entering his 7th year at WKU. Last year, 19-13, 11-7 in Conference USA. Very similar metrics to Towson in terms of sort of just being middle of the road and not necessarily standing out in any one thing, although their tempo last year was 96, which was considerably better than most of these mid-major teams that we're discussing. So, Mike, I mean, in a Conference USA here, where there is an opportunity to just go up and grab it, what does Western Kentucky have working for them that can help them as it gets deeper into the season to sort of maybe separate themselves from the rest of this conference?
Yeah, I think Conference USA is particularly interesting from the mid-major ranks. I think they're easily going to get 2 in. Talked about UAB. I'm surprised Western Kentucky is not higher than 99 on KenPom. When we're about to talk about everything that's kind of going on with them, but UNT is going to be solid. Like, they're going to play some good teams within their conference. So I think this is a league that'll get 2 in. It's just going to be which 2. You got Florida Atlantic too. I think all 4 of those guys are in the top 100 KenPom. So yeah, for Western Kentucky themselves, I mean, Davian McKnight. You have a star point guard, and you have Jamarian Sharp, who entered the transfer portal but returned. He's 7'4", 7'5", shot blocker. I mean, when you have the point in the center like this, and they've a lot of experience, you can definitely make some noise for McKnight specifically. Average 16, 5 and 5, almost 2 steals a game. I mean, this guy can get to the rim, solid from mid range, still developing an outside shot. Sharp erasing shots at the rim. With Walker Kessler gone from Auburn, this is the leading shot blocker coming back in college. 4.6 blocks per game. You watch him, and it's pretty crazy, pretty wild to watch him do that. So Rick Stansbury did a great job keeping Sharp in the fold here. It's going to be a game changer on the defensive side. And then you got the transfer portal. I mean, it's bringing in depth. It's got upside. It's got guys from the Power 5 conferences, so down transfers. So you got guard Christian Lander from Indiana. It's going to help with the ball handling. Dante Allen from Kentucky, that microwave scorer that we like to talk about. We've got the big wing Emmanuel Akot. He's 6'8" from Boise State. He's a knockdown shooter. I was going to Memphis originally this offseason, but steered over to Western Kentucky. So, 2 other starters coming back, offering shooting and depth. So it's a plenty on this team, which is why I'm surprised they're 99th. Luke Frampton, 38% from deep. Jarius Hamilton, he's a good second option. Averaged almost 13 points per game. To me, there's not a ton of weaknesses on this roster. I don't know, Eric. What do you, for you, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say that there are weaknesses on this roster, really at all, right? I mean, we talk about Coach Stansbury getting busy in the portal. It's almost an embarrassment of riches, right? The downside to that is a lot of new faces, a lot of guys that haven't played together before. So it's going to take some time for these players to gel. Coach Stansbury is really going to have to find a rotation that is going to play well off of each other. It's obviously going to have to manage some egos, right? You talk about some of these down transfers, guys that were playing in high major conferences, a season ago, now down here in Conference USA. It's more of almost like a personnel consideration. But honestly, it's a nice problem to have, right? The other thing for this team, for the Hilltoppers, is, despite Sharp being individually a very tough defensive matchup, this team wasn't great defensively overall. 279th in opponent 3-point percentage. That is due in large part to the fact that they were also 344th in opponent assisted field goals, right? So their opponents were able to get open looks by way of facilitators getting the ball out to the perimeter. A lot of those shots were going down. And we talked about this with the Blazers, right? Conference USA is going to be really tough this year, right? So if you're letting your opponents hit threes, if you're letting your opponents get at least high quality looks by way of the assists, like they're going to have a tough out in Conference USA. So they really need to clean up those areas if they want to either contend for the title by way of the tournament or make a compelling argument as a 2-bid conference.
I say this every opportunity that I can get. Winning the portal doesn't necessarily mean you win on the court, and this is sort of that double-edged sword that they're working with here at Western Kentucky. Definitely bringing in that talent, but how does it gel? How does it come together? Is Stansbury going to be able to get the most out of these guys and put them into positions to be successful? I think we will find out very quickly in their season. Next in our list of mid-majors to watch this year, the Iona Gales, representing the MAAC the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. A couple of different add a vowel in there, right? Make a new conference. That's basically how it goes these days. But in spite of all that, you definitely will know the coach's name. This is Coach Rick Pitino, now entering his third year with Iona. Last year, 25-8, 17-3 in the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. Pretty good offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. Good tempo, good enough anyway. Now this is the Scott Drew conundrum here, where you don't want to look at the guy, you want to talk about the coach. And Mike, in spite of whatever issues there may be with Rick Pitino, he's a damn good basketball coach.
Yeah, I mean, the guy can coach hoops, right? If you just take away all the other stuff, like pretty good at what he does. So, man, like, look at his resume. It speaks for itself. Won the 96 title with Kentucky. He's the only coach to take 3 schools to a Final Four. So, yeah, I mean, guy just gets it done. And look what he's doing at Iona, right? We're talking about them as a solid mid-major team and just his going into his third year. So obviously a big leap last year in year 2 in the metrics, but just missed the tournament. Got to win that conference tournament, man. So it starts with forward Nelly Jr. Joseph. He's back. He's one of the top mid-major players in the country. First team All MAAC. Averaged 13 points, 8 rebounds, over a block and a steal a game. And the guy's just a load down low on both ends of the floor. He's going to command attention. Probably going to need to be a little bit better of a facilitator just to get some of these other guys involved. But if this team wants to reach its potential, this guy's going to have to live up to the hype. So, Eric, when you look at maybe some of the backcourt here and some of the guys that he's playing around, any weaknesses or anything, any cause for concerns that you see?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things to note, right? Like on the weaknesses front, like, we've got guards like Tyson Jolly heading out, like Elijah Joyner heading out, right? So it poses the question, like, who's going to step up to fill their role for this team. Walter Clayton seems like probably the odds-on favorite to do so, but we talk about just the youth on this team. Cruz Davis, another player that potentially steps up, but however you slice it, depending on young unproven players to step into major roles, it can make things a little bit turbulent, especially as we talk about the beginning part of the season. The other thing that I'll call out is really something more so that they just kind of generally need to clean up, and that's their 3-point shooting. 202nd in the country last year, and they lost their top shooters. So, I talked about Clayton earlier. He's going to be someone that they'll need to stretch the floor. He shot nearly 36% last year. Quinn Slazinski, another player that shot in the mid 30s, 34%. Coming in at 6'9", he'll play next to Nelly Jr. Joseph, excuse me. But these are guys that are all going to need to knock down some threes and expand on the defensive end, because really nobody else on the roster shot above 25%, right? So they either really need someone to take a considerable step forward on the shooting from the perimeter, or they're going to have to have someone kind of come out of nowhere and start knocking down shots for them, and either of those are legitimate question marks.
If any of you viewers have seen our top 20, and if you haven't, hit us up on TikTok at Get Green Screens. You can also find us there on Twitter at the same handle. A common theme that we talk about are those individual players improving their 3-point shooting. But across college basketball, nobody's scared to shoot the 3 ball. They're not scared to shoot it, but they're also not converting on those shots the way that they need to be successful. That is kind of the way that a lot of the times that the college game is going. The game of basketball in general has gone, where everybody just values the 3-point shot so much. And if you're not making them and you don't got the guys, you don't have the horses to make that strategy work, it can lead to some games where you look back and you're like, well, this is a talented team with a good coach. How did they just get beat by, 2 Who doesn't? And, well, their threes weren't falling that night, and they weren't playing defense the way that they needed to. So let's move on. We have but 2 more teams left to talk about today. While we're teeing this up, if you haven't followed us on TikTok and Twitter at Get Green Screens, and like and subscribe here on YouTube as well, go ahead and do that. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about our mid-major teams so far today. Are there any that we haven't discussed yet that maybe you feel like we should have? Give them some love in the comment section and let us know what you feel like we've missed out on. The second to last team we will discuss today are the Golden Eagles of Oral Roberts from the Summit League. KenPom ranked 120th in the preseason. Head coach Paul Mills entering his 6th year with Oral Roberts. Last year, 19-12, 12-6 in the Summit League, 60th offensive efficiency, 36th in tempo. The Golden Eagles like to get up and down, Mike. We did earlier in the show, you mentioned our guy Max Abmas, who we have on our top 20 countdown as well. Tell us about Abmas, what he brings to the table, and what else Oral Roberts does well.
Well, if you're sleeping under a rock or just not following college basketball, you missed this kid explode onto the scene a few years ago and almost get this team to an Elite Eight. Man, this is his final year. He's going to try to make another run here in March. Got to get there first. You look at this conference, the Summit League, and it's a one bid league. So, it does help having the best player coming back, right? And one of the best players, probably the best player in school history, right? But yeah, they really burst onto the scene a few years ago when they went to the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed. So for Abmas, he's a 2-time first team all-summer performer. He was the player of the year in 2021. Probably would have been the player of the year last year, but Baylor Shireman was around. So the kid averaged 23 points, 4 assists. Just dangerous scorer, man, on all levels. I mean, he's so much fun to watch. And man, I really want to see him again in March. But Coach Mills done a lot of good things in the portal, man, helping Abmas on the offensive side. He had Kevin O'Banner a few years ago, and he transferred last year to Texas Tech, and that was kind of his running mate. This year he's got a few more options. It feels like one intriguing player is 7'4" Arkansas center Connor Vanover. And the guy's a wiry shot blocker, but he can shoot threes. I mean, he averaged, almost 2 blocks a game in 15 minutes. So, put up some pretty insane games early last year, and then just didn't really see the floor much. So he can be a dangerous pick and pop player and can control the paint. Not a big dude, real slender, but I mean, hey, we're picking up blocks, right? That's erasing shots on the other end. So, he's probably going to play next to Patrick Mwamba. He comes over from UT Arlington. He averaged 10 points per game. He's also another plus defender. And we're saying that because they were 290th in defensive efficiency. So starting these 2 guys, you're already starting to make headway. So that's going to push someone like Shane Weaver maybe to the second team, or even if you bring one of these guys off the bench and leave Weaver in the starting lineup, you're definitely got some options here. Damari Williams also transferred from Arizona State. He's an elite defensive player. I just don't know how he's going to kind of factor in because you've got a bunch of guards that you can go to. Isaac McBride, averaged 12 points a game. Trey Phipps, 8 points a game. Kareem McBride, also 7 points a game. Carlos Jurgens at 6 points a game. I mean, all these guys are back, so it's a very experienced team. It's just going to be an exciting team to watch. I feel like there's more talent that Max Abmas has had around him since he's really been there. So a lot to look forward to.
This is a team, like, in spite of being down here in the, around 120 in this KenPom ranking, there's a lot to like about this squad. And Abmas is a big part of that. When you have that superstar ability, somebody that, this is a guy that, like you said, Mike, unless you were under a rock, was sort of that Cinderella story on his own a couple of years ago in the tournament. And we talk about superstars in college basketball, and that's exactly what this guy is. On the other side of that, though, Eric, this isn't a perfect team by any stretch. There are a few things that in order for them to make this to make the big tournament without winning the Summit League, especially like Mike, you mentioned this is a one bid league. And even if they run the table and it's going to take a lot for a team like Oral Roberts to go on without winning that conference tournament. Where are the weaknesses here, and what are they going to need to shore up so they can go ahead and snag that bid in that conference tournament to guarantee their spot in in the big tournament in March?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like shout out to Coach Mills for recognizing that he's got an all-timer for his program in A. Smith, and going out and getting some supporting pieces to put around him, right? The things that are of concern for the Golden Eagles, Mike, you touched on it. This team was pretty pitiful on the defensive end last year, and while they went out and added guys like Vanover and Mwamba in the front court, those are guys that are a bit more inclined on the offensive side, right? So I'm not sure how well their play is going to translate into any sort of improvement on the defensive side. And like we've talked about with a lot of the teams here in the mid majors, a lot of their struggles has to do with how frequently or really how infrequently they're turning the ball over. This team in particular, second to last in the league, 357th overall in opponent turnover percentage, near the bottom of the league in steal percentage, right? So they're not getting those timely stops. They're not getting those extra possessions by way of the turnover. And then the other thing here, we talked about this with a couple of the other teams on our countdown. A. Smith is elite, period, full stop, right? But this team can get single threaded, right? The question that it presents is there a secondary piece that can potentially step forward for those nights where defenses focus on taking A. Smith out of the game, right? Mike mentioned Isaac McBride earlier. He's shown an ability to put the ball through the hoop, so he seems like a player that could potentially take a step forward. But even that, the gulf between him and A. Smith is wide, right? So ultimately, like we've talked about a lot, with these mid-major programs, they become single-threaded, become a single-faceted operation, and things get really hairy for them. So they're going to need someone to step up to run alongside A. Smith if they want to make any sort of postseason run, in my opinion.
All right, so we've talked a lot tonight about some one bid leagues. There's also been a lot of talk around the country recently. A lot of coaches, a lot of athletic directors have been making their opinions known about this question I'm about to ask you. This could be a whole other show, so I'm just going to ask you 3 words or less. A. Smith is a guy that unless they win their conference tournament, we're not going to see them. 3 words or less. Should the tournament expand to 128 teams?
No.
Eric?
N-O, period.
All right, I like it. We're all on the same page.
What about you? Hold on, we're not letting you off the hook.
No, I absolutely not. You do miss out on a guy like A. Smith, a true superstar, and there's more than one of these guys. But everybody getting in, I'm not, and I broke my own rule. I said 3 words, and here I am giving you a paragraph about it. But I'm going to say, I'm in the host chair. I have the microphone, so you will listen to every word I have to say. Okay? I'm going to say no as well, though. I do not want that tournament expanded. Lastly here, last on our show sheet, but not last in our hearts, the Kent State Golden Flashes from not the MAC, but just the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. KenPom ranked preseason 123rd. Rob Senderoff, the head coach there, 12th year at Kent State. We've seen a lot of these mid-majors with some tenured coaches that are really, that have laid the groundwork for the type of ball that they want to play. And Senderoff is definitely one of those. Went 23-11 last year, 16-4 in the Mid-American. In spite having 198th ranked offensive efficiency, 243rd ranked tempo, 121st defensive efficiency as well. Nothing really stands out, like jumps out there, but they found a way to win 23 games and 16 in their conference. So is this another thing, Mike, where we're talking about, a superstar being able to sort of push a team through those things? Tell us about the Golden Flashes.
Yeah, superstar again, Sincere Carey, the reigning MAC Player of the Year. Carey, this guy averaged almost 18 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, 4.8 assists. Can do some things on the defensive end, but really just a dynamic 3-level scorer. Like we talked about with Jelly Walker, Max Abmas is going to make life difficult mid-majors for defenses. But, outside of him, you get the backcourt returning, Giovanni Santiago, Malik Jacobs, who is an all-league defensive player, basically a glove. He can shut you down. A little bit to be desired on the front court, which Eric will touch on, but you get an intra-conference transfer. Thomas here to fill the void of kind of these front court losses. He's 6'8", coming over from Ball State, averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds. Gonna have to play some defense though. But really, this team, it's all about Carey. Can he just kind of carry them through, and then in the conference tournament, can he just kind of take over? But this team definitely has some holes.
Eric, what are those holes, man? You have a superstar, but there's a lot lacking on this roster.
Yeah, Mike alluded to it with the front court, right? They lost 3 key players there: Andrew Garcia, Justin Hamilton, Travell Beck, and the combination of those players, really is what made this team dangerous last year, right? So. Big question mark as to how they carry forward with those 3 gone. We talked about the transfer Thomas coming in a little bit, but really it seems to me like they're going to need to depend on someone like Von Cameron Davis stepping up, and I'm not sure if he's quite at that point in his game to do it. And the second thing that's honestly kind of puzzling, on the defensive side, they both gave up a ton of threes. And they allowed their opponents to get to the free throw line at a really high rate, right? Like these are things that you typically don't see happening together, right? So kind of puzzling. If it's a trend that continues, it's something that will put them in a difficult spot to potentially make their way out of their conference. And they're like we've talked about with a lot of these mid majors, right? Defensive struggles is a product of these 4 or 5 man out schemes. And I worry with so much turnover in their front court. They have a smaller backcourt. I almost worry they might take a step in the wrong direction defensively, and that'll be a recipe disaster for these Golden Flashes.
A whole lot to like with these mid-majors that we've discussed today. There's some struggles that they have, but they're mid-majors. It's to be expected. We're going to put a bow on this thing, guys. It's great stuff. We love to talk about these mid-majors. They're a big part of what we like to watch on a night in and night out basis, especially when it comes to setting DFS lineups that some people might not know some of these guys that we've talked about tonight. If you're into that stuff, make sure that you follow Mike on Twitter at MCHolland34. Follow Eric on Twitter at FantasyNav on Twitter. Follow me at Dr. William Cannon on Twitter. Also, don't hesitate to head over to drroto.com. Subscribe over there. Get in our Discords. Read all the great content that we're putting out over there about college basketball, about the World Cup, about fantasy football, about anything that you can think of. And hey, you watched us tonight. You've already won. And now we're done.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.